Go ahead, Daniel, if you can record.
Yeah. Actually, I always relate it back to psychology. And what we're talking about today is very similar to what we call cognitive behavior psychology. And Sadariji is shaking, is nodding at me. What I'm understanding that we're talking about is when we talk about rasa is the word. We're not advocating denying our desires, but or suppressing them, because if we suppress them, like emotions, they pop up when you least expect it at the most inconvenient time. But what we're talking about is mastery of it and control it. And then my understanding of how we do that is understanding these desires, like for example, intellectualizing it. Say, for example, and understanding why we should or should not do a certain behavior, like until it cognitively processes in your mind and decide that this is not right, or this is the reason why I should not do it. And then in the end, you talk about focusing on free will or using free will, but also talking about having Ishvara in front of you as you make decision, having that focus. So it's almost like, I think you're familiar with, they have something in America here that they say, they have these little band that says, what would Jesus do? And people wear it on their wrist. You remember that? So it's almost kind of like that. You're saying, okay, I should or should not do this, or give into this desire, because based on my understanding of living under the influences of Ishvara, or this is the reason why. Am I understanding it?
Yeah. So generally these things that we have a taste for, it need not be a problem, right? It need not be a problem, and we can live without many things. It's not a problem. So yeah, that's why sometimes we quote all these things that can be addictive, and so that you already mentioned, Ishvara has to be brought in. A power, the recognition of helplessness has to be brought in, right? I am helpless. First, accept that fact. That's the starting point. Are you helpless or not? Because that awareness may not be there. If I don't accept that I'm helpless, then there is no question, no Ishvara can help me. Correct? So once that acceptance is there, then of course Ishvara is brought in. And you mentioned the word cognitive, cognition. Yeah, cognitively you understand what is it that you really get out of it, and slowly the person is made to see that it's not as important as you think it is, and so the person slowly grows out of that. So it's a cognitive process, and there is an emotional attachment to it, and so it has to be carefully brought about, which you have talked about. Yeah,
It's amazing how the Gita is so old, and now the Western world is reinventing all the stuff that we had already known so long ago. I mean, and the way it's explained in the Gita, it's so much better than reading. When I was doing my PhD, cognitive behavior, all that stuff. It's so much more intense here. It's amazing.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So it's good if you can connect what we are doing here to what's in your professional psychology. The narratives. Maybe someday you can talk to us about your field, and how what is psychology, what is modern psychology.
Sure, I'd contribute anything that I can.
ஒரு நிமிஷம் 8 மணிக்கு சொல்லு. Right. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said I'll be happy to contribute in any way that I can.
Yeah,
First.
so what exactly your profession is today, how people like us who are not psychologists can understand that field, the professional field, and then what kind of connections you see from there to here, and its advantages, its limitations, etc. If you can address
Yeah,
that, that'll be
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. I will.
Yeah, yeah, Anil Pugalia.
The word Dehina, so I didn't really get how is it related.
Can you be louder? We are not able to hear you.
Hello, am I audible?
Not well. We are audible only is very, very feeble.
Okay, just a minute. Uh, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so my question is the word Dehina in the sloka there, 59th, what exactly does it refer to there?
So Dehinaha. So Purushasya. So of the person. That's all it is. So Shashti. Shashti of Dehin.
Oh,
Yeah, Shashti. So it goes along with Niraharasya. Okay, so Shashti. And then goes along with Asya in the second line. Rasaha api Asya.
okay.
Asya means Tasya. Tasya Purushasya. Tasya Dehinaha.
And another thing, in the previous class also, you mentioned about the subjective versus intellectual value of things. In this session also, you just referred it briefly. So I am not able to get what exactly are you trying to highlight with that? Like, what is the, how do I relate it to the context?
Yeah, so what we are saying there is we see things in two ways. We see a thing is valuable to us. Any object in this world is valuable to us or not valuable. It's all the same thing. So that value is split into a subjective value and an objective value. Objective means there is a value. Okay, there is a value. For anything in this world, there is a value. So there is a value. You look at a piece of a clock like this, there is a value for it. Any object in this world has a value. Every food item has a value. Objective value. The food will appease my hunger. That's an objective value. It's not a subjective value. But then there is a subjective value. Seeing things that really are not true. Seeing things in it that are not true. And I'm emotionally attached to something. And which an intellectual understanding cannot explain. Why am I emotionally attached to something? So we put it under the subjective category. Correct?
Okay, so
So
is
we
it like,
separate.
it's something like that this is good or that is good or it is not good? Like that is the one I am not able to relate. Why are we discussing that? Matlab, what is the context?
Yeah, the context is that again, the context is whether I am in control of my sense pursuits or not. That is the context. Because here is Krishna is talking about that right from Arjuna's question onwards, right after Arjuna's question. Prajahati yada kaman, one who gives up binding desires, like that he's talking about. So how do you give up binding desires? It's not possible. It's an impossibility if you carefully think about it. So therefore, this is that topic is being important. So we are talking about, okay, why do I fall prey to anything? Why am I not? Why can't I live without something? So then intellectually I can analyze and say, no object can bring me the security I want. Okay, that makes me see the object as it is, and so I only have to deal with my emotional subjective value. Okay, and how do you deal with the emotional subjective value? Well, by once again looking at the limitations of any object in this world. Okay, once again looking at the limitations, so that viveka is needed. And then he will talk later about further how else, what are the other steps that are needed to neutralize that emotional value for something. Okay, very interesting. Again, important point to note is none of these things would be called suppression in general. A person might say, oh, you're denying yourself, therefore this is suppression. Yeah, it can be suppression, but it need not, it is not suppression when it is backed by our Shastra, when it is backed by a proper understanding of the realities. Yeah.
Okay, I'll think more on this, and maybe if I have further doubts, I'll come back.
Yeah, sure, I understand. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Vijay.
Namaskaram. So I have come across this quote which applies here. I think it says like sometimes we think that fulfilling one desire, okay, I'll finish this and then I will, be away from it. But desire is something like once you fulfill one, the mind will want something more. It's like pouring ghee into fire, they say, right? Somewhere in some scripture, I think it's mentioned. So mind will keep wanting more. So one who says that, okay, let me finish this and then probably I'll get into this path of, getting away from desires, but it never happens. This is what they generally say. What's your view on this, Guruji?
My view, in these matters we can't be too creative, because Krishna's view is what we are trying to understand. So yeah, you're right. So last time I think we gave the example of this fire, no? Example of fire. So fire never says enough, and you pour one more spoon of ghee, it is ready to accept it. You pour another picture of ghee, it says fine, I love it. Never says enough. So desire is related to that. It is equal to this fire, analaha. So never, nothing is enough. No amount is enough. That is why, and it's not a problem, because that's why we are given a mind, we are given a buddhi to think through it and say, you think through it, and then it's possible to grow out of it, come out of that spell. Yeah, what you've heard is right. So if you can tell us what shloka or what subhashita it is, that will be good also.
I'll check.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Manjula Shivshankar. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Hari Om, Vijay Kumarji.
Yeah.
In the OPD, I had a patient, online consultation. She was very depressed. Then I related to her that I have delivered her 30 years ago. She's so depressed because she's doing all the work at home alone, and her maid has gone back to Kerala. And she has this OCD, that her house has to be clean, that this. She's already on antidepressants, and she wanted another opinion with a psychiatrist. Now, how do I counsel this way? I'm not a counselor. I myself need a counselor once in a way, to be honest. Now, how do I? Then yesterday I came across a junior colleague of mine who is so depressed, almost in the verge of, I felt like committing suicide. So I went back to Bhagavad Gita. Why Bhagavad Gita is not available to the commoner at the tip of the reach of the hand? Why are we struggling? And with the pandemic, it's becoming more and more difficult for a lady, more so for a lady in our atmosphere, Indian scenario, because the men are not to be asked for anything here, not to share the household, not to share anything else. How do we address this issue?
Yeah. So it's a tough job. Again, it depends on the situation, etc. The OCD, depression, these are all difficult conditions, and they need constant help. They need constant counseling, and slowly they have to be coaxed. No, it's a coaxing process, right? There's no recipe for these kinds of things, and this puja and prarthana, these are all important things, that we do in our life, in our daily activities. This is why we say we must include puja. We must include some few minutes of prarthana, if not puja, because what it does is it of course it builds that connection with Ishvara, Parameshwara, all-knowing Parameshwara, but also it breaks our routine. Otherwise, this person that we are talking about, OCD, is constantly thinking about how neat the house should be. And can anybody say the house is neat? Anybody can come and say the house is not neat. This is not good. That is not good. There's no such thing as a clean house. You can, at some point, you draw a line and say this is good enough. So it's a slow process. You can't say what they're doing is wrong. If you do that, then that won't work. And you have to be careful. And at the same time, you have to help them see some facts, which may be a little different for them. So it's not easy, ma. I think they need counseling, and prayer and prarthana has to be there in the daily life, and help them see that sometimes we have to let go of certain things during certain situations. So suppose the children are not well. Are you going to focus your attention on how clean your living room is? And two children are not well. What do you do at that point? Are you going to spend time in the living room, or are you going to spend time with your children? So somehow you have to create some situations where they can see that they have to prioritize. And so the prioritization is important. Pandemic situation, prioritization. All of us are prioritizing. Maid, even in my house, the maid is not there, and so my back is hurting. What can I do? So I've reduced the amount of housekeeping I do, and I don't wash my house every day, and I once in 2 days, 3 days. So you bring up these examples. And I don't know, support groups, the support groups are very important, and they can do wonders that an individual cannot do. So like this is a long story, and it all depends on the particular situation, and depends on how family members, whether they are cooperative. These kinds of things are there. Whether a family member can come in and be of assistance. These things have to be explored. And so I don't claim this to be an easy problem to solve, but one has to carefully look at it and then counsel the person. If the person develops trust in you or in the counselor, that's a huge step. Because then at least the person knows that there is somebody I can rely on when things get tough. So that's a huge step. And then after that, one has to take it forward. So I see Anjali raising her hand. She is a PhD in psychology. Let's hear from her also.
So, that's an issue that a lot of Indian women face. And actually, the depression part is very common for women. Men also, but for some reason, like I know the statistics in the US is 90% of women at one time or other in their life will get depressed. I just want to talk a little bit about the OCD. The OCD is basically an anxiety disorder, and the OCD, the symptoms, the behaviors of the OCD, it's basic sort of like a security blanket. People do those behaviors to distract, to make them feel secure, um, because of whatever fear or anxiety they're feeling. So being able to address that, and Jaikumar is absolutely right. Having a counselor talk to them and explore that aspect of where that fear is coming from. Ultimately, it goes back to, as the psychologists work with this person, it goes back to a fear of dying. So whatever is inciting that, and it's totally irrational. It usually it's not very rational, but being able to tease that out, it takes some work. As far as the depression, with your colleague they're talking about, I think you're absolutely right, Manjula ji. The teachings of the Bhagavad Gita would help tremendously, because what depression is a misunderstanding of your life, really. Because when something happens, the meaning they attach to that is distorted or it's negative. So because of that, you know, you get depressed, because if you're looking at something in a way that is hurtful or unhelpful to you, it makes you feel bad, versus if you look at it from another way. And you know, the essence of Bhagavad Gita is that we are, our Atma is perfect. So if we can attach, you know, and I use this a lot, I don't tell my Christian patients that I do, but the idea of bringing back the idea of, you know, you at your essence is perfect. What we're dealing with here is transitional and transient things, and the way we look at it is very important. So what a therapist or a psychologist does with somebody who is depressed is look at those thought processes that are harmful to them. And those thought processes could be stuff that from, you know, small time they get into this idea of looking at things in a certain way, right? And that is the essence of depression. Also, you know, medication will help because the neurotransmitters and, you know, stuff gets a little distorted. But generally, you know, but Jai Kumarji is absolutely right. You know, it needs a good therapist who they have trust in, who they understand, and who feel that they're being understood. And it can be very helpful. But it's an issue that a lot of women face for some reason.
Thanks,
You know.
thanks, Anjali. Swapna is also a, you know, social worker. Maybe she
Yeah,
has
where
some.
is she? Is she there?
Swapna, if you have any thoughts, feel free to share.
I'm here. Anjali ji covered everything very well.
Yeah. So yeah, that's you know, it's a big topic, and so Manjula, it's not a one-stop thing. There's no magic solution, in other words, and you just have to identify what the person's innermost fears are, and creatively try to help them, right? And as long as they're seeing you, talking to you, that's a good sign. And it's amazing that you delivered her 30 years ago. Is that what I heard?
Yes, yes. So she
Yeah,
could relate to me well. She went on and on and on.
yeah,
Then I realized.
yeah. So you can try this. You can invite her home to your home, okay, and keep your home shabby, and let her have a sense of shock. What? This is not, and then have a dialogue around that to tell me now.
I myself is so clean.
Something like that. You do
I
something like, I
can't
mean,
be
you have to be creative. You know, there is no formula, there is no recipe book here. And so, since you said she is obsessed about keeping her house clean, and so tell me now, if my house is not dirty in your mind, so what? Tell me, do you have, is your opinion about me less now than it was before, or what? Just have the dialogue. Am I somehow inferior than before? Something. Just be creative. Because her problem is the cleanliness, right? So are you now respecting me less because my house is not as clean? And can she then begin to see, you know, etc. You know, we have to be very creative in these matters. So think about that.
For me to create a shabbiness and invite her.
Yeah.
Kumarji, can I have a word?
Yeah, please, Rukmini ji. Yeah.
Dr. Manjula, I have been dealing with economically weaker section of ladies. They used to have lot of problems. Drunkard husband, without a quarrel, their day doesn't pass by. And earnings are meager, children are plenty, you know. And in those situations, I have seen number one, they are so preoccupied with their day-to-day activities. And one day, if they get a little money and they get 3 square meals, they are so grateful to God. They say, "Ma'am, mera aaj ka din bahut acha gaya." You know, and you make her to count her blessings. She has a home, she has got children, she has got work. You know, in olden times, I have seen my mothers, my grandmothers, they have never heard in their vocabulary the word depression. The depression, what we in nowadays call hormonal disbalance for everything, during pregnancy, after delivery, menopause, at every stage we have so many scientific psychological terms we have never heard. What was the cushion? The joint family system and the blessings they count and the focus they have. So make her to count her blessings and express a sense of gratitude to God that I have so much. Don't worry about the house meant for us. We are not for the house. The house is meant for us. We are not a slave to the house. So that is one thing. As Jaikumarji rightly said, she has to prioritize her this thing. So this makes focus on Ishvara and prayers. I have so many things. Okay, the house is dirty, let it be. I cannot do this today. I couldn't cook today. So the priorities and make her to count her blessings and express the gratitude. I am better off than so many other people in the world. That will strengthen her. Maybe you can all more
The
knowledgeable.
root cause is having more.
Yeah.
Operated on her mother-in-law who is in OT. They are well-to-do, very well-to-do people. I told her, why don't you stay with your mother-in-law? Go and stay with her. She said no. I think the root cause is depression. And she is putting it as cleanliness, that this, blah, blah, blah. But that has to be dealt with. And I think the Bhagavad Gita is the answer for me for everything.
But all of a sudden, you cannot transfer her to Bhagavad Gita, and at this mode, it's very difficult for her to understand and get the teachings.
Yeah.
Right? It has to take
So,
some time gradually. So, first, starting a prayer, trust in God, believing Ishvara, and counting your blessings. All these things makes little oriented, then gradually she can come to Bhagavad Gita, I think.
so all the best to you, Manjula ji. And it's a slow process, and we also need to, perhaps a counselor. Previously, the counselor did not study Bhagavad Gita. Now the counselor is studying Bhagavad Gita. So now perhaps that the perspective is very different, and the way you approach it might be different. So hopefully this class will help you in that aspect also. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We'll stop now.
Jagumarji, one thing. Did I see Venkatramanji in the class today?
Yeah, he was there.
I saw. Yes,
So,
I saw
I was
Venkatraman.
glad to see him.
To have him back.
I
Yes.
saw him for a few minutes, and I'm glad to
Correct.
see he has recovered.
Right.
So
I saw him also. So very glad that he could make it.
So
Okay, let's conclude with a prarthana. Yeah, we are going to have a Swamiji. Swamiji is coming at 5 o'clock today. So those of you who can join, please do.
Sure.
So Rameshji, is this a question?
I was about to ask about Swamiji's lecture. That's
Swamiji is coming at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So those of you who can join.
Same Zoom link?
Same
Is
link.
is that link?
Same link.
Okay,
Same
thank
link
you.
as this one. Yeah.
Jaykumarji, unable to attend. I took a day off tomorrow, so I'll be there.
All right. All right. Nice.
Yeah.
See you, Mohiniji.
Yeah.
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय धन्वन्तरये अमृतकलशहस्ताय सर्वमय विनाशनाय त्रैलोक्यनाथाय श्रीमहाविष्णवे नमः। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय धन्वन्तरये अमृतकलशहस्ताय सर्वमय विनाशनाय त्रैलोक्यनाथाय श्रीमहाविष्णवे नमः। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय धन्वन्तरये अमृतकलशहस्ताय सर्वामय विनाशनाय त्रैलोक्यनाथाय श्री महाविष्णवे नमः।